voice of FinTech.
Welcome to Voice of FinTech, a podcast mapping out the Swiss and global FinTech scene, connecting FinTech enthusiasts with startups, incubators, accelerators, business angels and VCs, and incumbents interested in partnerships. Voice of FinTech will help you navigate the FinTech ecosystem. Here you can listen to the startup founder stories, what investors and incumbents are looking for when dealing with startups, and find out more about resources provided by incubators and accelerators. My name is Rudy Falad and I'll be hosting this podcast. Hello and welcome to Voice of FinTech. Today we're joined by Fred, who is one of the managing directors leading the ING Ventures team. And we're going to talk about what ING does in terms of investing in startups, in fintechs in Europe and around the world. What's the approach, whether that's strategic or for profit or both, and some of the success stories that obviously they were able to pull off. So I'm curious to hear more about ING's approach to investing in startups, given the ING's reputation in terms of digital transformation and leading the way there in Europe. So hi Fred, how are you today?
I'm good, thanks Rudolph. Thanks for having me on your show.
Great. So let's just dive into it. And maybe can you explain and briefly describe the ING's approach to startups overall, if you look at, range of options that you have from partnering to investing?
Yeah, so ING has, I'd say, quite a long history of innovation in financial services and is probably one of the early adopters of technology in financial services. So a good example of that is the creation of ING Direct, which was in the early 90s. Which arguably was one of the world's first fintechs. And it's great to see that this innovation culture remains a strong part of ING's DNA today. And we generally believe in the relevance of disruption, of transformation, and for this to be a continuous, sort of never complete process. So certainly there is a strong culture of innovation within ING. And that's sort of expressed in different ways. ING has quite a well-staffed and well-funded and generally well-regarded innovation group, which has several sort of teams doing different things. So there's ING Labs, which is primarily a company builder. They have a lab in Amsterdam, in London, and in Singapore, where internal and external teams are supported to build products. And if the market testing is successful, then those products are then either spun in and become part of a business unit, or in some cases they are spun out into companies. And there's already been quite a few successful examples of that. ING Labs also operates as a kind of accelerator program. It's operated out of Brussels, and it used to be called the FinTech Village. It's now called the Brussels Lab. But they invite an annual cohort of startups to effectively help ING solve ING problems. And so in a sense, it's more like a kind of proof of concept lab, but which has been very successful and is very well regarded. Next to ING Labs, there's what's called the FinTech Partnerships team, which is a team of people who research and benchmark early and growth stage companies for ING to collaborate with, often at the request of an ING business unit that have a problem they're looking for a solution for. And they also manage the relationships that ING has with those early and growth stage companies.
Right.
And I think at the moment they have about 170 or so collaborations with these startups. And then maybe finally, there's ING Ventures, the team that I'm part of, and we invest into what we consider to be the best startups that we believe in being relevant to the future of financial services and beyond banking.
Right. So what is your team's mandate? And, given that you're an investor, a corporate VC arm, basically, of ING, it's quite important to see whether you are a strategic investor or you do it for profit. There are ways to do it one way or another or both ways, right? So what's important for you? And then if you do look at the strategy, how far or how close to the current ING business the potential portfolio companies have to be?
So I'm one of the two managing directors of ING Ventures, and we report to ING's group head of innovation, who reports directly to the CEO. ING Ventures was formed in late 2017 with a 300 million euro capital commitment from the management board. So that's only ING's money. And with a mandate to invest into early and growth stage companies globally, even though we're focused on Europe, the US, and Asia, probably more Europe. And our mandate is to achieve both a financial return and a strategic return for ING. And we can unpack that a bit more, but we've certainly found that it's difficult to achieve a strategic return from companies that are not financially successful. And so that financial aspect of what we do is really important.
Right. But what are the strategic KPIs, for example, just a handful for you? I mean, how do you look at that?
We have quite a lot of flexibility in terms of how we interpret that strategic return. And that's important. I can explain that later. But I'd say the main justifications or the main strategic returns that we aim to achieve is to support companies. So number one, to support companies with whom ING has some kind of collaboration or has the intention to collaborate. So we help them with their funding journey. By investing, we become closer to them, and it can be a very powerful win-win relationship. Second reason is what we call sort of deep out of the money option. So we've made investments into companies that are not immediately relevant to ING today, but where we believe that in the future they will be relevant. And so we like to place bets, which are maybe a little bit more out there. Because if we only ever invest into things that are relevant for ING today, then we're never a step ahead of what's happening in the market. So we like to have that flexibility. And then maybe finally, we've also made 2 investments into companies where we felt that there's almost like a hedge. So effectively, they're competing against ING. And by investing into these companies, supporting them, staying close to them, from an ING shareholder perspective, we were sort of hedging the activities of the bank by being close to those companies. Mm-hmm. So those, I'd say, are the 3 main themes when we look at sort of strategic returns.
Great. And what kind of startups have you invested in? Maybe let's classify it by whether that's B2B, B2B, or by geography, but also by the stage, right? You kind of alluded to, taking also wilder bets. So maybe that means that companies are even pre-revenue or not.
Yeah, it's quite a mix. So we currently have a portfolio of 32 companies that we've invested in. And we've made 7 year to date. So we've been very active throughout this difficult and complicated 2020. We actually inherited a portfolio of 10 investments that were made before ING Ventures was formed in 2017. And those investments had been made by various teams within ING. The earliest of those is actually Cabbage, where ING invested in 2015. And Cabbage, if what we read in the news that American Express will acquire Cabbage, will also be our first exit. Which will be good to have that on the board. Most of the investments that we've made are into Series A and Series B stage companies. Of the 32 companies in our portfolio, 3 investments are in the US, 2 are in Asia, and the rest are scattered around Europe. But we also have a growing number of seed stage investments, and those are mainly fall into 2 buckets. Either companies that have been co-created by ING, so let's say consortiums where ING collaborates with other banks to create a new solution in the market, or seed stage companies that are effectively ING lab spinouts, of which there is a growing number. The majority of our portfolio is B2B as a business model, but we've also invested into 5 B2C companies, which are WeLab, which is a Hong Kong-based consumer lending platform. FinTonic started off as a personal financial management tool in Spain, but they're now sort of evolving into a kind of like full sort of financial services platform. I think even neobank in Spain, but also growing in Mexico and Chile. Invested in Twisto, which is a Czech Republic and Poland buy now, pay later platform. Clark, which is a digital insurance broker and robo-advisor in Germany. And Scopity, which is a property technology company in Germany.
Great. And how do you find them? How does your scouting work? Do you do research leveraging maybe AI, or your analysts do it, or you have so much inbound that you're scared to pick up a phone? How does that work?
It's a big mix, actually. I mean, we try to operate following venture capital best practices. So we do all the usual things, networking, attending conferences, but we also have the advantage of leveraging being part of a large and quite well-regarded bank with 55,000 employees and operating in 40 markets. So we have that internal crowd that can be very helpful. We do get quite a lot of inbound interest directly. So that's either referrals via our network or LinkedIn. or via the ventures@ing.com email address, which is on our website. We also get a lot of excellent leads from our colleagues, especially that FinTech partnerships team that I mentioned earlier, and from various innovation-minded colleagues. And actually, it's quite powerful for us as a filter that a lot of the companies that we look at are ones that ING is already working with in one shape, form, or another. And that can be very insightful to us as we make investment decisions, and gives us basically a kind of a deeper level of due diligence in terms of their way of working, in terms of do their products actually work, what's the technology layer, how do they manage non-financial risks, that sort of thing. In terms of, and so recently there have been also a growing number of initiatives coming out of the ING labs that are reaching what we consider to be sufficient proof points and traction that they effectively spin out of ING, and we can support them on that journey. And then finally, we also align ourselves with the strategic priorities of ING itself, and frequently reach out or do deep dives, effectively engage in outbound inquiries, looking at companies and value spaces that we think are interesting and relevant from an ING perspective.
Right. And how does the selection process work? What are the minimum criteria before investing for you? So in other words, if I come up with a beautiful deck and send it to you and say, Fred, this is an amazing idea, the best thing since sliced bread, as they say, would you back it, or do you need MVP? Do you need revenue, or how does that work for you?
Yeah, we don't technically have a minimum criteria such as annual recurring revenue. Key for us is that there needs to be some kind of strategic rationale in addition to the financial aspects of the investment thesis being strong.
Right.
I mean, we're not unicorn hunting, unlike sort of a traditional VC. And so I'd say our criteria is broader. Like, we don't need the companies that we invest in to kind of reach that kind of valuation for us to think it's an attractive investment opportunity. Yeah, I already mentioned earlier, like the kinds of strategic returns that we're looking for. That clearly is always sort of front and center. Like, we will not invest into a company just because we think it will be a good financial investment.
Right. And we talked about it, that it's strategic and for profit in a way that the portfolio companies have to be viable, right? So profitable, maybe I should have said for gain. You said you will have your first exit soon. But do you plan for exit or not? I guess you're a minority shareholder, so that's not much you can do if you wouldn't like the exit, right? Maybe you have some protections there because there are strategic angles to your cooperation, maybe multiple channels, how these portfolio companies work with ING. But how does the economics work until then, right? I mean, do you just recognize the share of income in your P&L, and then if you do have a gain, you have a gain? Is it part of the balance sheet as well? I guess so, right? Not the fund.
Yeah, we operate just as a team within ING, and we're investing from ING's balance sheet. I'd say we're patient capital, so we don't have, we don't sit under the same kind of pressure that a fund would sit under to deliver returns within a short time frame. But we are still investors at heart, and so it is important for us to deliver financial returns. And we have internal KPIs against which we are measured in that regard. But there are also some investments that we will make on behalf of some business unit within ING where there might never be the intention to sell that position. And so within our portfolio, we have different buckets in terms of how we measure sort of the performance and the returns. But yeah, we operate, I'd say, much like every other CVC in the market.
Right. So, well, that leads me to maybe a sub question. How does the monitoring of your cooperation of the performance work? You have your threshold returns that you want to hit, etc. But for instance, if things don't go the way you want it, right? Imagine that obviously it's startup, so the success percentage is low. So how does that work in that case? How do you step in? How do you work together to fix it? Or do you want to also exit if things that are not going well the right way before it's even worse? Or in other words, what I want to say is, yes, it's strategic and it's financial. That also means that you're a responsible investor, right? And sometimes, difficult decisions have to be made.
Yeah, that's right. And we've been quite lucky until now that we haven't had any seriously difficult situations. But they will come, and that is a normal part of the sort of portfolio theory and also the risk profile of what we do. There will be losses, and sadly, losses usually occur before the big wins occur, which is never ideal when you're part of a corporate that has quarterly reporting, etc. But I'd say our portfolio is generally healthy, but we do follow our portfolio very closely. We are often on the boards of the companies we invest in, either as a full board member or as an observer. In some cases, that role is taken up by a member of the business where there is a strategic relationship. For example, Contour, which is a Singapore-based company that's developing digital letters of credit. The head of ING's trade finance unit is on the board of that company because he's an expert in that area. He can add value to their journey. And so that makes sense in that particular instance. But we will try to help those companies that we invest in as best we can. Every situation is unique, and in some cases, investing more capital helps the management teams, find the path to a solution or just continue to grow their business. There will be situations where we will no longer have appetite to support a company because we are not convinced in their ability to be successful.
I keep on pressing about this to some degree, but it's not only about that. But are there any lessons learned that you can share with the audience? The things that whether the startups or the cooperation setup could have been maybe different, or things like that.
Yeah, there's quite a lot of lessons learned. I'll say, I think having a relatively lean and independent governance within, in this case, ING Ventures is really helpful, and it enables us to operate in quite an efficient way where we have clear accountability, and there's also a concentration and leveraging of the experience of the team rather than sort of outsourcing investment decisions to people that don't do that as their main job. So the investment committee of ING Ventures is myself, the other MD, and the group head of innovation of ING, up to a certain threshold, up to 10 million euros. If we invest beyond that point, then we involve the management board of ING. But I think that's definitely a lesson learned, and I've seen how the governance has been set up in other CVCs, and I'd say the way we have it is definitely a better way of setting it up. I'd say another lesson learned, collaborating with a bank like ING can take time, but it can be massively impactful, both reputationally and commercially for startups. Analysis and due diligence of early stage companies is really important. And we also have the ability to leverage our, as I mentioned, 55,000 colleagues, which could be really helpful because we have data science experts, we have machine learning experts, we have distributed ledger experts, and we can draw on that knowledge and resource. But in parallel, gut feel is also really important. And that's helped by, at least in my case, having done the job of being a principal investor for over 15 years now. Another lesson learned, I'd say there's no silver bullet when it comes to innovation in a large corporate. There are lots of relevant initiatives that we're involved in, both from an investment perspective, but also from a collaboration perspective. And together, I think these can have a large impact over time, if given the time and if given the right level of support and engagement from the business. Another lesson learned in this space, I'd say, is that startups should constantly be investing time into a network of potential investors, especially when they're not raising a round, actually, in the short term. I think it will make it much easier for them to raise capital when they do raise a round. And then maybe final sort of pearl, if you want, and we've invested into quite a few B2B companies. And I see it time and time again that they just really need to be careful that they don't only chase large potential clients, but also sign up a constant stream of small and medium-sized customers from whom they can learn, demonstrate product market fit, and build traction. And this then will help them land bigger contracts.
Right. Well, you talked about the success stories of the startups that you invested in, etc. Is there any favorite child that you have? I know it's very hard because everybody loves their children equally. I know that. So again, you blame it on me that you had to say only one or two.
Yeah, it's you're right. It's like picking a favorite child. I'd say Eigen Technologies. We only invested earlier this year, but the sort of the ING Ventures journey with them has been going on for extending like over a year before we made the investment, and we helped ING and Eigen get across the line in terms of getting a master services agreement just in parallel while we were investing. And then off the back of that investment, we've also agreed a framework with them for a more detailed collaboration, which involves data sharing and exploring new use cases, which was as part of that investment round. So there, let's say, ING Ventures was helpful to Eigen in terms of getting them across the line with the corporate. And I think that we have a very sort of symbiotic and a win-win relationship with them. So another company in our portfolio that we have a close working relationship is called Flowcast. They're based in San Francisco. We invested about a year ago. they have just completed a successful proof of concept with ING Belgium as part of the Brussels lab to develop an early warning system for ING Retail to identify when retail clients are likely to go into financial distress, to help ING approach those clients with potential solutions and to offer them assistance before a negative event occurs. They're developing that technology with ING Belgium, and hopefully, if that's successful, we can scale that across the other ING countries. And maybe a final example is maybe Cobase is a company that was built within the ING labs. They were spun out, and we held the majority position in that company and helped them succeed in the market. And earlier this year, actually, I think it's Nordea and Crédit Agricole invested and have now moved us to a position where we're no longer a majority shareholder, which was our intention. But yeah, it's a kind of financial success story from the ING labs, which we like to see as well.
Great, Fred. So it was interesting to hear what you're up to. What kind of people would you like to hear from most? Whether that would be potential startup founders looking to work with you, or hubs that may have ideas where they've seen the startups that may be of interest for you. And what's the best way to reach out to you?
I mean, the best way to get in touch with us is always via a referral, I find. So try to find somebody that knows a member of the ING Ventures team to get a proper introduction by email is always best. Otherwise, there is an ING Ventures website, which is as part of the ING main bank website. And there are sort of digital forms that people can fill out depending on the nature of their inquiry. And there's also an email address, which is ventures@ing.com, where the team regularly monitors what comes in there, and we frequently discuss inquiries and investment opportunities that come in via the email address. Look, generally, we're always interested in speaking to or learning about interesting companies that are shaping the future of financial services and beyond banking. It needs to be what we consider to be relevant to the future of ING as well, which is not always easy for people from the outside to make that judgment. But I'd say ING's geographic footprint of being mostly, actually the only retail bank that sort of covers pretty much every country in continental Europe outside of Scandinavia. It's kind of aligning with that footprint, I think, is really helpful in terms of increasing the strategic relevance. Look, and we're also always interested in speaking to other investors into FinTech companies, either earlier stage, so investing into seed and pre-Series A companies, or indeed investors that are investing into sort of Series B, Series C, who might be interested in our portfolio. Also always happy to speak to them and build out that network.
Great. Well, thank you, Fred, and good luck to ING Ventures.
Thank you very much.
Thank you for listening to Voice of FinTech podcast. If you haven't already, check out also voiceoffintech.com, where you will find all the episodes and additional resources related to the podcast. You can also subscribe to Voice of FinTech on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Google, or any other podcast app that you like. If you have any suggestions on the topics or guests, or how to make this podcast better for you, please email us at info@voiceoffintech.com. Happy to hear from you. Thank you.